Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So since Friday is Mahashivaratri, I decided that today I would glorify Lord Shiva. I will read selections from the Shreemad-Bhägavatam, which will help us to properly understand and also praise this great personality. This first excerpt is from a book known as Brihad-bhägavatämritam. And in the first part, there is a conversation between Maharaj Parikshit and his mother Uttara. The scene is after Parikshit has heard Shreemad-Bhägavatam and is awaiting the bite of the Takshaka snake bird. So in between that time, his mother Uttara comes and asks him, "You've just heard from Shukadev the entire Shreemad-Bhägavatam. Can you explain it for me concisely?" So Parikshit then tells his mother this narration, the first part. And in the first part, Narada travels throughout the entire material and spiritual realm in order to find out who has received the greatest mercy from Krishna. And he starts off with a Brahmin, and the Brahmin said, "Oh, no, it's not me." He said, "There's this king. He has received more mercy from Krishna." So Narada runs to that king, and the king says, "No, not me." So he then goes to Indra, and Indra says, "No, there's beyond me, above me, that's received mercy is Lord Brahma." So when Narada goes to see his father, Lord Brahma, Lord Brahma receives his son, Narada, and Narada says, "My father, you are God." And Brahma blocks his ears. "Why are you saying this, my son? I am not God." So I'd like to pick up from that point. Brahma is now going to tell his son Narada who has received greater mercy than him. So I kindly ask you to listen. "My dear son Narada, what else need I tell you about my ill fortune? In fact, in this universe, I see no object of Lord Vishnu's mercy equal to Mahadev Shiva. He is famous as the dear friend of the Lord. Lord Shiva is always intoxicated by the taste found at Sri Krishna's lotus feet. He therefore has no interest in any of the normal goals of life, even up to rulership of the universe and the sense enjoyment such rulership provides. As if ridiculing materialists like me who are simply addicted to sense enjoyment. Lord Shiva goes around naked, wearing garlands of dustura, arka, and bones, and smears himself all over with ashes. his matted locks scattered about. He moves around aimlessly like a madman, yet he is unable to conceal his glories. With joy he carries on his head the Ganga, the water born that washed Krishna's lotus feet. When Lord Shiva dances, he destroys the universe. And by Krishna's grace, Lord Shiva and his wife are able to award deliverance to candidates like me who eagerly want it. Indeed, everyone who lives on Lord Shiva's planet is liberated. By his mercy, so many persons have become liberated souls and even pure devotees of Krishna. The personality of Godhead tolerates offenses against himself, but not against Lord Shiva. When Maya Danava, the master of Tripura, grew intoxicated with pride by Lord Shiva's benediction, and then placed Lord Shiva in danger, and when Lord Shiva was troubled by other demons like Vrika, the Supreme Lord saved him and encouraged him with nectarian words. And sometimes to broadcast Lord Shiva's glories, Lord Krishna takes a subordinate role and worships him with intimate devotion. As Krishna was personally present at the churning of the nectar from the milk ocean, he and the other rulers of the universe chose to worship Lord Shiva, the life and soul of Gauri. Lord Shiva collected and drank the terrible poison, which thereafter became his ornament. He was then ceremonially bathed in the presence of everyone assembled and was glorified with floods of praise. The Puranas sing of Lord Hari's compassion toward Lord Hara. Surely you know all of this and more, O thoughtful sage Narada. All you have to do to recall these glories is exercise your memory. Parikshit continued to speak to his mother. O dear mother, affectionate protector of your son, Narada bowed down to his spiritual master, Lord Brahma. And when Brahma saw his son eager to set off for Kailash, Brahma then told him something more. Lord Brahma said, Kubera once earned the gratitude of Lord Shiva by devotedly worshipping him. From then on, within this universe, Lord Shiva has submitted to Kubera's authority on Kubera's Mount Kailash. Lord Shiva, the husband of Uma, lives there as the guardian of Kubera's side of the heavenly sphere. Accompanied by suitable attendants, he shows but a small fraction of his opulence. And just as the personality of Godhead Krishna, brought under the control by the devotion of servants like me, and resides on my planet and in heaven and elsewhere, Lord Shiva lives in Kailash, displaying suitable pastimes. Now, let me tell you the opinion of the Vayu Purana. The abode of Sri Mahadev lies outside the severed coverings of the universe. Eternal and full of happiness, that abode is absolutely real. It can be attained by the best of Lord Shiva's servants. There, Lord Shiva, served by the most excellent regalia, reveals himself in his full splendor, surrounded by companions who share opulence and beauty equal to his. As Lord Shiva's personal deity, he worships Lord Sankarshan. What amazing wonders does Lord Shiva in this manifestation not display? You have the power to go there because you have pure devotion for him. Therefore, go take shelter and see the real mercy of Krishna. Sri Parikshit said, "My dear mother Uttara, after Narada received these instructions, he departed for Shivaloka with joyful anticipation, chanting, Shiva, Krishna, Shiva, Krishna." Everybody? Shiva, Krishna, Shiva. All right, that's the first part. Did you like that so far? Now, when we were hearing Lord Brahma speak, the synopsis, very glimpse of Lord Shiva's exploit, he mentioned how Lord Shiva once drank an ocean of poison. So that's found in the 8th canto of Shreemad-Bhägavatam. And I just want to read one excerpt from that, which is glorification of Lord Shiva. For those who have come recently, my presentation tonight is simply a glorification of Lord Shiva, since Friday is his day. Shukadeva Goswami continued to speak to Maharaj Parikshit. When nectar did not come from the ocean of milk, despite so much endeavor by the best of demigods and demons, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everybody say, Ajita, personally began to churn the ocean. With his strong, glorious arms, which award fearlessness throughout the universe, he took hold of Vasuki and began churning the ocean, using the Mandara mountain as a churning rod. When engaged in this way, the Lord appeared like a beautifully situated mountain named Indranila. Fish, sharks, tortoises, and snakes were most agitated and perturbed. The entire ocean became turbulent, and even the large aquatic animals like whales, water elephants, crocodiles, and Timingala fish that can swallow smaller whales came to the surface. And while the ocean was being churned, it first produced a fiercely dangerous poison called Hala Hala. O King Parikshit, when that uncontrollable poison was forcefully spreading up and down in all directions, all the demigods, along with the Lord himself, Ajita, approached Lord Shiva, feeling unsheltered and very much afraid. They sought shelter of him. The demigods observed Lord Shiva sitting on the summit of Kailash hill with his wife Bhavani for the auspicious development of the three worlds. At that time, he was being worshipped by great saintly persons desiring liberation. The demigods offered him their obeisances and prayers with great respect. Lord Shiva is always benevolent toward all living entities. So when he saw that they were very much disturbed by the poison which was spreading everywhere, he was very compassionate. Thus he spoke to his eternal consort, Sati, as follows. So Lord Shiva now says to his wife, "My dear Bhavani, Just see how these living entities have been placed in danger because of the poison produced from the churning of the ocean of milk. It is my duty to give protection and safety to all living entities struggling for existence. Certainly, it is the duty of the Master to protect his suffering dependents. People in general, being bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are always engaged in animosity toward one another. But devotees, even at the risk of their own temporary lives, try to save them. My dear gentle wife Bhavani, when one performs benevolent activities for others, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everybody say, Hari, Hari, is very pleased. And when the Lord is pleased, I am also pleased, along with all other living creatures. Therefore, let me drink this poison, for all the living entities may thus become happy because of me. So there were some very good lessons in what Lord Shiva just said. Shukadeva Goswami then said, after informing Bhavani in this way, Lord Shiva began to drink the poison, and Bhavani, who knew perfectly well the capabilities of her husband, gave him permission to do so. Whenever I read this, I always like to make a point. Husbands, before doing something, what to speak of drinking an ocean of poison, get permission from your wife. Ladies, do you like that? Huh? Thereafter, Lord Shiva, who is dedicated to auspicious benevolent work for humanity, compassionately took the whole quantity of poison in his palm and drank it. In other words, what he did was, this was a whole ocean of poison. He shrunk it into his palm, like we take charnamrita, right? He went, as if in defamation, the poison born from the ocean of milk manifested its potency by marking Lord Shiva's neck with a bluish line. That line, however, is now accepted as an ornament of the Lord. And here is another important point from Shukadeva Goswami to us. It is said that great personalities almost always accept voluntary suffering because of the suffering of people in general. This is considered the highest method of worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present in everyone's heart. And when I read this, I remember my spiritual master, who at the verge of his 70th birthday got on a boat and with only 40 rupees in his pocket came to America to execute the order of his spiritual master. And on the boat, he suffered 2 heart attacks. But Krishna delivered him. He arrived September 17th, 1965, and almost 1 year it took him to establish the first Hare Krishna ISKCON temple in New York. And then from 1966 to 1977, Prabhupada had established, with the help of his disciples, 108 temples around the world. And now, since then, there are close to 400. And it reminds me, yes, he had to undergo lots of austerities and suffering for us, so that and many of you have told me, because you came to America in the 70s, back then, the only Hindu temple was ISKCON New Dwarka, Los Angeles. Many of you have told me. Now, since then, we have so many here in Southern California. And I'm sure there's going to be more and more and more and more. Upon hearing this act, everyone, including Bhavani, Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and the people in general, very highly praised this deed performed by Lord Shiva, who is worshipped by demigods and who bestows benedictions upon people. Scorpions, cobras, poisonous drugs, and other animals whose bites are poisonous took the opportunity to drink whatever little poison had fallen and scattered from Lord Shiva's hand while he was drinking. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. This next excerpt from Shreemad-Bhägavatam, there is a section known as the Shiva Gita, the prayer personally taught by Lord Shiva to the Prachetas. The Prachetas were the son of King Prachini-Barhishat. And while they were learning this prayer from Lord Shiva, Narada Muni was preaching to his father to come out of Maya, and told him a very interesting narration, the story of King Puranjana. It has to do with several chapters, 25, 26, 27, 28. 5 chapters is the teachings of Narada to their father. But in this section, when Lord Shiva arrives to teach these Prachetas, is a very nice description. The great sage Maitreya, the 3rd and 4th cantos of Bhagavatam, is a conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. Vidura originally wanted to hear from Uddhava, but Uddhava said, no, very close by is Maitreya. He is senior to me, and if I preach to you, that would be an offense on my part. So you go and approach Maitreya. So Vidura went and asked him many questions, takes up 2 cantos of Shreemad-Bhägavatam. My dear Vidura, when all the sons of Prachini-Barhi left home to execute austerities, they met Lord Shiva, who out of great mercy instructed them about the absolute truth. All the sons of Prachini-Barhi meditated upon those instructions, chanting and worshipping them with great care and attention. O best of the Brahmins, Maitreya says, it is very difficult for living entities encaged within a material body to have personal contact with Lord Shiva. Even great sages who have no material attachments do not contact him, despite their always being absorbed in meditation in order to attain his personal contact. Lord Shiva, the most powerful demigod, second only to Lord Vishnu, is self-sufficient, Maitreya says. Although he has nothing to aspire for in the material world, for the benefit of those in the material world, he is always busily engaged everywhere and is accompanied by his dangerous energies like Goddess Kali and Goddess Durga. However, the Prachetas were fortunate to see Lord Shiva emerging from the water with his associates. So at this particular time, they were by this big lake, and they heard all these musical sounds and instruments, and out came Lord Shiva. So here's Maitreya's description. His bodily luster was just like molten gold. His throat was bluish, yes. He had 3 eyes which looked very mercifully upon his devotees. He was accompanied by many musicians who were glorifying him. As soon as the Prachetas saw Lord Shiva, they immediately offered their obeisances in great amazement and fell down at the lotus feet of the Lord. Lord Shiva became very pleased with the Prachetas because generally Lord Shiva is the protector of the pious persons and persons of gentle behavior. Being very much pleased with the princess, he began to speak as follows. Lord Shiva said, "You are all the sons of King Prachini Barhi, and I wish all good fortune to you. I also know what you are going to do, and therefore I am visible to you just to show my mercy upon you." Now this is very interesting. Lots of things to keep in mind now. Listen to what Lord Shiva says. Any person who is surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who is the controller of everything, material nature and the living entity, is actually very dear to me. A person who executes their occupational duty properly for 100 births becomes qualified to occupy the post of Lord Brahma. So if anybody wants to become Lord Brahma, that's what you have to do. And if one becomes more qualified, one can approach me. But he didn't say you can become me, did he? That's not no possible. You can approach him. Just as you cannot become Krishna or Radha, no. But you can become Brahma. Just have to properly do your duty 100 births. Not so easy. And sometimes there's nobody fit to be Lord Brahma. So what happens? Krishna takes the job. When there's nobody fit, Krishna takes the role as Brahma. Because sometimes there's nobody fit for the job. Just like sometimes there's nobody fit to be president or whatever. So, like that. Lord Shiva continues. A person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service is immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. I myself and other demigods attain these planets after the destruction of this material world. You Prachetas are all devotees of the Lord, and as such, I appreciate that you are as respectable as the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. I know in this way that the devotees also respect me and that I am dear to them. Thus no one can be as dear to the devotees as I am. Now I shall chant one mantra, which is not only transcendental, pure and auspicious, but is the best prayer for anyone who is aspiring to attain the ultimate goal of life. when I chant this mantra, please hear it carefully and attentively. Well, actually, it's more than one shloka. It's a whole chapter. If you read that chapter of Shreemad-Bhägavatam, it's quite a few dozen shlokas. And what Lord Shiva does is he describes very, very minutely how Lord Narayan looks. He goes to a very detailed explanation how the faces, the ornaments, everything is described in that Shiva Gita. So if anyone is interested, it is the 4th canto. I think it's chapter 24, Shiva Gita. All right? Let us hear more glorification. So this excerpt is after the incident where Daksha blasphemed Lord Shiva, and then subsequently there was a fight, and then there was another sacrifice, and the Sati was not invited, and Lord Shiva told her, don't go, even though it's your father. He's going to say something, and that whatever he says is going to be tantamount to death. And sure enough, she goes, and her father acts in such a way, and then she immolates herself. And then when Lord Shiva finds out that his wife has burned herself up, he becomes extremely angry. He pulls a hair from his head and creates Virabhadra, the personified anger of Lord Shiva. And he and all of Lord Shiva's associates, they go to the sacrifice, they decimate it, and many Brahmins are wounded and dishonored. And then they finally find Daksha. And so Virabhadra is sitting on Daksha, trying to kill him, but he can't. So then he finds there's a particular kind of thing that is used to sacrifice the animal, and with that he beheads Daksha. And he takes the head of Daksha, Swaha, and throws it into the sacrificial fire pit. And then they return. So when the sacrifice was thus destroyed, all the Brahmins and demigods went to Lord Brahma. And Lord Brahma chastised them, saying, how can you expect to be happy when you dishonor Lord Shiva and don't invite him to the sacrifice? So Lord Brahma said, never mind. Lord Shiva is so great, even though he has just lost his wife, he's so great that if you go and apologize, he'll forgive you. So I want to read. Now, what happens is, Lord Brahma takes all the demigods to go see Lord Shiva. So in this section is a description of Kailash. Very, very interesting. And then a very quick description of how Lord Shiva is looking when the demigods go there. After thus instructing all the demigods, Pittas, lords of the living entities, Lord Brahma took them all with him and left for the abode of Lord Shiva known as Kailash Hill. The abode known as Kailash is full of different herbs and vegetables and is sanctified by Vedic hymns and mystic yoga practice. The residents of that abode are demigods by birth and have all mystic powers. Besides them, there are other human beings who are known as kinnaras and gandharvas, and they are accompanied by their beautiful wives, known as apsaras or angels. Kailash is full of mountains filled with all kinds of valuable jewels and minerals, and surrounded by all varieties of valuable trees and plants. The top of the hill is nicely decorated by various types of deer. There are many waterfalls in the mountains, and there are many beautiful caves in which the very beautiful wives of the mystics are found. On Kailash Hill, there is always the rhythmical sound of the peacock's sweet vibrations and the bees humming. Where I live in a place called Torrance. And if you go up the hill, you go to where the rich people live, Palos Verdes. But there's these couple of streets that you drive, all of a sudden, peacocks on top of people's house, or on the lawn, or in the middle of the street. You're driving and you got to stop. The peacocks roam from house to house because there's a law that says, don't touch the peacocks. So the other Sunday, my wife took me. Every year we go once a year to go see the peacocks. And they're in the driveway, at the front door. You never know where there's a peacock. Cuckoos are always singing and other birds whisper among themselves. There are tall trees with straight branches that appear to call sweet birds. And when herds of elephants pass through the hills, it appears that Kailash Hill moves with them. When the waterfalls resound, it appears that Kailash Hill does also. The whole of Kailash Hill is decorated with various kinds of trees. The entire hill is decorated with such trees, which produce flowers with fragrant aromas. There are different kinds of lotuses, such as Kumuda, Utpala, and Shatapatra. The forest appears to be a decorated garden, and the small lakes are full of various kinds of birds who whisper very sweetly. There are many kinds of other animals also, like deer, monkeys, boars, lions, rikshas, shalyakas, cows, asses, tigers, small deer, buffalo, and many other animals. There are varieties of deer, especially kasturi, the deer which bears musk. Besides the deer, there are many banana trees which decorate the hillside lakes very nicely. There is a small lake named Alakananda in which Sati used to take her bath, and that lake is especially auspicious. All the demigods, after seeing the specific beauty of Kailash Hill, were struck with wonder at the great opulence to be found there. Thus the demigods saw the wonderfully beautiful region known as Alaka in the forest known as Saugandhika, which means full of fragrance. The forest is known as Saugandhika because of its abundance of lotus flowers. And they also saw the two rivers named Nanda and Alakananda. These two rivers are sanctified by the dust of the lotus feet of Sri Govinda. Everybody say? Govinda. While traveling, the demigods passed over the forest known as Saugandhika, which is full of varieties of flowers, fruits, and desire trees. While passing over the forest, they also saw the regions of Yaksheshvara. In that celestial forest, there were many birds whose necks were colored red, and whose sweet sounds mixed with the humming of the bees. The lakes were abundantly decorated with crying swans, as well as strong-stemmed lotus flowers. All these atmospheric influences unsettled the forest elephants who flocked together in the sandalwood forest, and the blowing wind agitated the minds of the damsels. Passing by lakes, the demigods reached a place where there is a great banyan tree. That banyan tree was 800 miles high, and its branches spread over 600 miles around. The tree cast a fine shade which permanently cooled the temperature, but there was no noise of birds. Then the demigods saw Lord Shiva sitting under that tree, which was competent to give perfection to mystic yogis and to deliver all people. As grave as time eternal, he appeared to have given up all anger. Lord Shiva sat there, surrounded by saintly persons like Kuvera, the master of the Guyakas, and the 4 Kumaras, who were already liberated souls. Lord Shiva was grave and saintly. The demigods saw Lord Shiva situated in his perfection as the master of the senses, master of knowledge, master of fruitive activities, and the master of the path of achieving perfection. He was the friend of the entire world, and by virtue of his full affection for everyone, he was very auspicious. What does that name Shiva mean? Doesn't it mean? It means auspicious, doesn't it? Yeah. He was seated on a deerskin and was practicing all forms of austerity. And because his body was smeared with ashes, he looked like an evening cloud. On his hair was the sign of a half moon, a symbolic representation. He was seated on a straw mattress and was speaking to everyone present, including the great sage Narada, to whom he specifically spoke about the absolute truth. His left leg was placed on his right thigh, and his left hand was placed on his left thigh. In his right hand, he held Rudraksha beads. This sitting posture is called Virasana. He sat in this pose, and his finger was in the mode of argument. All the sages and demigods, headed by Indra, offered their respectful obeisances unto Lord Shiva with folded hands. Lord Shiva was dressed in saffron garments and absorbed in trance, thus appearing to be the foremost of sages. Lord Shiva's lotus feet were worshipped by both demigods and demons, but still, in spite of his exalted position, as soon as he saw that Lord Brahma was there, he immediately stood up and offered him respect by bowing down and touching his lotus feet, just as Vamanadev offered his respectful obeisances to his father Kashyapa Muni. All the sages who were sitting with Lord Shiva, such as Narada and others, also offered their respectful obeisances to Lord Brahma. After being so worshipped, Lord Brahma, smiling, began to speak. So I mentioned how Sati had given up her body. So when she was Sri Shiva-Raman Bhagavan Ki, when she was about to give up her body, she spoke some very heavy words to her father Daksha. And in the course of her speaking, she glorified her husband. So I very much like what Sati says about Lord Shiva here. The way Prabhupada translates is very interesting. The blessed goddess Sati said, Lord Shiva is the most beloved of all living entities. He has no rival. No one is very dear to him, and no one is his enemy. So she's speaking to her father Daksha. No one but you could be envious of such a universal being who is free from all enmity. Twice born Daksha, a man like you can simply find fault in the qualities of others. Now this next one is very important. Lord Shiva not only finds no fault with others, but if someone has a little good quality, he magnifies it greatly. Unfortunately, you have found fault with such a great soul. It is not wonderful for persons who have accepted the transient material body as the self to engage always in deriding great souls. Such envy on the part of materialistic persons is very good, because that is the way they fall down. And so they are diminished by the dust of the feet of great personalities. My dear Father, you are committing the greatest offense by envying Lord Shiva, whose very name, consisting of two syllables, Shiva, everybody, purifies one of all sinful activities. His order is never neglected. Lord Shiva is always pure, and no one but you envies him. You are envious of Lord Shiva, who is the friend of all living entities within the three worlds. For the common man, he fulfills all desires. And because of their engagement in thinking of his lotus feet, he also blesses higher personalities who are seeking after Brahmananda, transcendental bliss. Do you think that greater, more respectable personalities than you, such as Lord Brahma, do not know this, and in quotation marks, so-called inauspicious person who goes under the name Lord Shiva? He associates with demons in the crematorium. His locks of hair are scattered all over his body. He is garlanded with human skulls and smeared with ashes from the crematorium. But in spite of all these inauspicious qualities, great personalities like Lord Brahma honor him by accepting the flowers offered to his lotus feet and placing them with great respect on their heads. Now this next section, Sati gives us some very nice information. Elevated transcendentalists may sometimes forego the rules and regulations of the Vedas, since they do not need to follow them, just as demigods travel in space, whereas ordinary men travel on the surface of the earth. In the Vedas, there are directions for two kinds of activities. Activities for those who are attached to material enjoyment, and activities for those who are materially detached. In consideration of these two kinds of activities, there are two kinds of people who have different symptoms. But if one wants to see two kinds of activities in the same person, that is contradictory. Otherwise, both kinds of activities may be neglected by a person who is transcendentally situated. Now this next one, she really lets him have it. My dear Father, the opulence we possess, in other words, herself and Lord Shiva, the opulence we possess is impossible for either you or your flatterers to imagine. For persons who engage in fruitive activities by performing great sacrifices are concerned only with satisfying their bodily necessities by eating foodstuff offered as sacrifice. On the other hand, we can exhibit our opulences simply by desiring to do so. This can be achieved only great personalities who are renounced, self-realized souls. Unfortunately, although I could go for another hour, I think my time has run its course. So, in closing, there are two very powerful mantras, and in this way I will finish my glorification of Lord Shiva. First, from the Brahma Samhita, Shirang yata dati vikara vishesha yogat sanjayate nahitata prithagasti heto ya shambhutam apitata samupaiti karyad govindamari purushang tamahang bhajami. Just as milk is transformed into curd by the actions of acid, and yet the effect curd is neither the same as nor different from its cause, milk, so I, Lord Brahma, adore the primeval Lord Govinda, everybody, Govinda, of whom the state of Shambhu is a transformation for the performance of the work of destruction. And then this last mantra is found at the end of Shreemad-Bhägavatam. This is by Asuta Goswami. Bhagavatam is finishing up. Nimnam ganang yata ganga devanam achyuto yata vaishnavanam yata shambhu purananam idam tata. Just as the Ganga is the greatest of all rivers, just as Lord Achyuta is supreme among deities, and Lord Shambhu is the greatest of the Vaishnavas, so Shreemad-Bhägavatam is the greatest of all Puranas. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to glorify Lord Shiva.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.